I thought the worst thing my wife could do was leave me. I was wrong. The real nightmare began when the bank called and the FBI knocked on my door. They say you never truly know someone until they show you who they are. Looking back now, I wonder if I ever really knew Alina at all. For most of our 5-year marriage, I believed I was living the kind of life people envy: quiet, predictable, safe. I was 34, working as a software engineer in a mid-sized firm. I liked my routines: morning coffee, coding marathons, quiet dinners with my wife, and the occasional weekend hike. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. Alina worked part-time as a freelance designer. She was warm, thoughtful, or so I thought. She'd leave me sticky notes with reminders and encouragements, sometimes even cheesy little jokes. Every now and then, she'd surprise me with my favorite takeout or drag me to a movie she knew I'd secretly enjoy. I trusted her completely. There was never a doubt in my mind that we were building something solid, maybe a house next year, maybe a kid after that. We kept our finances mostly separate. It was just easier that way, we said. But we had a shared goal: to build a life together. We'd talk about moving out of our small rental apartment and getting a home with a garden, maybe even a dog. If there were cracks in our foundation, I couldn't see them, or maybe I didn't want to. Looking back, I remember moments, small things I brushed off. Her nervous glance when I asked about our savings, the way she'd suddenly change the topic when I mentioned long-term plans. But she always had an explanation, always a smile, and I never pressed. Why would I? She was my wife, my partner, my person. That morning, I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee, her signature brew, dark with a hint of cinnamon. She'd already left for a client meeting, or so I thought. I took a sip, checked my phone, and scrolled through emails. There was one subject line that stood out: loan confirmation approved. It didn't make sense. I hadn't applied for any loan. I furrowed my brow and opened it. That was the first crack. I just didn't know then how deep it would run. I stared at the screen, blinking. Maybe it was spam or some glitch in the system. The email was from a legit bank I recognized, not one I used, but one I'd heard of. The message confirmed a $25,000 personal loan had been approved in my name. It had my full name, my date of birth, even the last 4 digits of my social security number. My stomach tightened. I clicked on the link and logged into the loan portal using the temporary credentials from the email. Everything matched. It really was me. Or at least someone pretending to be me. I remember laughing nervously, trying to reason with myself. There has to be a mistake. Maybe it's identity theft. Maybe my info got leaked online. I told myself not to panic. I'd just call the bank, report it, and they'd sort it out. But while I waited on hold, another alert came in. A second loan, different bank, $15,000. That's when the coffee turned sour in my stomach. When I finally got through to someone, the representative confirmed the application came from my address. The IP matched my home internet provider. The documents uploaded, my pay stubs, W-2, even a copy of my driver's license, were all accurate. "How is that possible?" I asked, my voice tight. "I never sent anything." "I understand, sir," the woman said gently. "We can open a fraud case, but the application looks very convincing." The moment I hung up, I dialed Alina. No answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. I texted, "Call me ASAP, something's wrong." No reply. A strange coldness crept into my chest, the kind that starts in your ribs and spreads outward. I walked around the apartment looking for something, anything that might explain what was going on. Her laptop was gone. Her purse, her charger, the framed photo of us on the nightstand, missing. And then I saw it, a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter, half tucked beneath the fruit bowl. My name was written on it in her handwriting. I didn't open it yet. My hands were shaking. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. I already knew, somehow, that everything had just changed, and it was only the beginning. I unfolded the note with fingers that felt numb. The handwriting was rushed, messier than usual, but it was definitely hers. "Ryan, I'm sorry for everything. I had to leave. Please don't try to find me. Alina." That was it, no explanation, no goodbye, just a few careless lines that shattered 5 years of life together. I stood there in the kitchen, rereading those words like they might change if I looked long enough. But they didn't. The silence in the apartment was deafening, so loud it made my thoughts feel like they were echoing inside my skull. I pulled open the bedroom drawers. Empty. Her clothes were gone, her jewelry box cleared out, even the little wooden box where we kept spare keys and small valuables gone. She didn't just leave, she planned this. That realization hit harder than anything else. She didn't disappear in a moment of panic. She prepared, she waited, and then she vanished. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Instead, I sank onto the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, the note still clutched in my hand. The next hour was a blur. I called her again. Then her mom, her sister. No one knew anything, or if they did, they weren't saying. Her social media was wiped clean. Email gone, even her freelance site was offline. I kept thinking there has to be a mistake. There has to be a reason this can't be real. But the reality only deepened. I checked our shared Dropbox, deleted. I opened my personal files, and that's when I noticed it. Documents were missing. Bank statements, tax records, my digital IDs, everything someone would need to impersonate me financially. I felt sick. I wanted to believe she'd been coerced, forced into something, but deep down I already knew. This was deliberate. Later that night, another alert came through. A third loan, this time for $10,000. My name, my credit, my debt. And no wife. No partner. Just a hollow apartment and a deep, gnawing sense of betrayal that I couldn't begin to put into words. That night I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor with my back to the wall, the note on the coffee table in front of me. One question looped in my mind over and over. Why? But I wouldn't get answers, not yet. First came the consequences. The morning after Alina vanished, I woke up still on the floor. My neck ached, my eyes burned, and the weight in my chest hadn't gone anywhere. It felt like my life had split in two before the note and after. I forced myself up and made coffee, though I didn't drink it. The apartment was too quiet, too clean. Everything that belonged to her was gone, but her presence still lingered in small, mocking ways. A single slipper under the couch. A sweater I'd always loved hanging on the back of a chair. Then the phone rang. "Mr. Foster," a sharp voice said. "This is Melanie Torres with Capital Line Recovery. We're calling about the overdue balance on your personal loan of $25,000. I cut her off. I didn't take out any loan. There was a pause. "Sir, the documents have your signature and home address. If this is a dispute, you'll need to file it with the fraud department, but payments are currently delinquent." That call was the first of many. Over the next week, I was buried in paperwork. 5 loans, all in my name, totaling more than $70,000, each one tied to legitimate documentation, each one connected to my home IP, my email, my digital fingerprints. Debt collectors, legal notices, my credit score dropped like a stone. I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare, except it was mine. At work, things got tense. HR called me in to check on my situation. My manager started handing off projects just in case I needed space. Coworkers whispered. Some asked if I was okay. Others didn't ask anything at all. I felt exposed, ashamed. Even though I hadn't done anything wrong, the stain was there on my name, on my reputation, on my life. I went to the police to file a fraud report. The officer who took my statement barely looked up from his keyboard. "Could have been anyone," he muttered. "You'd be surprised how often spouses do this." "But she was my wife." He gave me a look, half pity, half indifference, and shrugged. People change. Walking out of that precinct, I felt more alone than I ever had. The world was moving on, but I was stuck in this slow, unraveling disaster. Still, something in me refused to stay down. I didn't know what Alina had done exactly, or why, but I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of my fight back. I didn't know what justice would look like, or if it would come at all, but I knew I couldn't just sit in that apartment, drowning in bills that weren't mine. I had to move. I had to fight. The first thing I did was hire a lawyer. His name was Mark Hastings, gruff voice, gray beard, the kind of guy who didn't sugarcoat anything. "Your case is messy," he said bluntly after our first meeting, "but not impossible." He walked me through everything, freezing my credit, gathering evidence, reporting each loan as fraudulent. It was overwhelming, a dozen calls a day, mountains of paperwork, endless online forms. But it gave me a sense of purpose. For the first time in days, I wasn't just reacting, I was taking control. Then came the visit from a woman named Agent Sinclair, someone from the Federal Trade Commission who had been alerted by one of the banks during their internal fraud screening. We see patterns like this, she told me. Multiple high-value loans, digital footprints that start clean but shift over time, and then, poof, disappearance. I showed her everything I had, the note, the missing documents, even screenshots of Alina's deleted profiles. Sinclair nodded slowly. It's possible your wife's actions are part of a larger fraud operation, or she learned how to do this on her own. That idea chilled me more than I expected. Alina, quiet and creative Alina, orchestrating this all alone, it didn't make sense. But then again, none of it did. I gave Sinclair access to old emails, messages, shared drives. And as I did, I realized just how much I'd ignored over the years. How she'd always insisted on managing her own finances, how she'd kept her work life private, how easily she'd redirected conversations about trust and transparency. Had I been blind or just unwilling to see? At night when I couldn't sleep, I replayed everything in my head. The little lies, the distant glances, the moments I'd brushed off. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the betrayal. The fact that the person I loved most had seen me as nothing more than a tool, a means to an end. But if she thought I'd crumble quietly, she didn't know me at all. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Agent Sinclair wasn't the type to share much, but I could tell something had shifted the second she returned a few days later, this time with 2 other agents in tow. "We're opening a broader investigation," she told me. "Your case isn't isolated. We found 3 other individuals reporting similar fraud patterns, all tied to the same digital fingerprints, and all with one connection in common." She paused, watching me closely. "Alina Foster." The room felt smaller. My breath caught for a moment. Hearing her name spoken like that, clinical, detached, drove home just how far removed she was from the woman I thought I knew. "We believe she's either acting as part of a group or she's learned from one. Possibly both," Sinclair continued. "We're not just looking at credit fraud anymore. This may involve identity theft on a multi-state scale." I should have felt vindicated that they were finally seeing it, finally acting. But instead I felt hollow. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a con, and I'd been the perfect mark. The agents asked for more old photos of her ID, any messages where she discussed finances, screenshots of her banking behavior. Every time I handed something over, it was like giving up another piece of our life together. But the more we dug, the more disturbing the picture became. There were records of VPN usage tied to Eastern European servers, unusual file transfers on our shared Wi-Fi at odd hours of the night, even emails in languages I didn't recognize, cached fragments Alina had failed to erase completely. "She covered her tracks well," one of the agents murmured, "but not perfectly." I remembered one night months before she left, when she'd asked if I thought it was scary how much personal data people stored online. I'd laughed it off, said, "That's the world we live in." Now I wondered if she had been testing me. Sinclair wasn't finished. We traced a payment from one of the loans to a digital wallet recently used at an airport lounge in Nevada. It's the first real lead we've got. Nevada, she could have been anywhere by now. But they were closing in, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like I wasn't alone in this. The web was wide, but it was starting to tighten. Once the agents left, I sat in silence for a long time. My apartment, once filled with warmth and shared routines, now felt like a crime scene. Every corner held a memory and a question. Had she been lying the whole time, or had something changed her? I couldn't stop myself from going through our old photos, chats, even receipts. It wasn't about nostalgia anymore, it was evidence. I started to see things I had missed, little cracks in the surface that seemed insignificant then but screamed now. Like the time she insisted on handling our tax filings to save us a few $100. I'd thought it was sweet, helpful, I never even looked at what she filed. Or the trip she took to visit her cousin 2 states away. She said it was just for a weekend. I never asked questions, I trusted her. But now I saw that the same weekend lined up perfectly with the date one of the fraudulent loans was approved. There were more details like that. So many little lies that had slid under the radar, wrapped in affection and routine. I felt angry, not the kind of anger that explodes, but the kind that simmers. Quiet, hot, constant. I hated that she'd used my love as a weapon, that she'd made me an accomplice in my own destruction without me ever knowing. The agents encouraged me to go through Alina's old external drives, phones, anything I still had. I found one tucked deep inside a shoebox in our storage closet. It was an old hard drive, a backup we used when we were first married. I plugged it in, unsure what I'd find. Most of it was benign design files, photos, music, but one folder stood out. Buried beneath layers of junk folders, it was labeled Alt Proposals. Inside were scans of multiple identities, not just mine but others. Fake names, fake documents, even detailed notes about different banks and loan loopholes. That was when I knew, without a doubt, this wasn't desperation. This was experience. And Alina wasn't running from a mistake. She was running because she'd done this before, maybe many times. My life hadn't just been collateral damage. It had been her blueprint. I wasn't just uncovering who she was now. I was finally learning who she'd always been. The days following my discovery felt like a strange kind of awakening. The hard drive files were my first solid proof that Alina's disappearance wasn't some reckless act of desperation. It was calculated. The depth of her planning shook me to the core, but it also sparked a determination I hadn't felt since this all began. With the folder Alt Proposals open in front of me, I contacted Agent Sinclair again. I sent over the files, explaining what I'd found. Within hours, the federal agents were back in touch. This time with a new energy, they called it a breakthrough. Apparently, the documents I found matched several open investigations across multiple states. Alina's digital footprint wasn't just on our case. She was linked to at least 4 other identity theft rings, with dozens of victims. The loans taken out in my name were just the tip of the iceberg. Sinclair told me they were preparing a warrant for her last known location, the airport lounge in Nevada. They were tracking the digital wallets tied to the payments from my loans and others. The team was coordinating with local law enforcement there. For the first time, I felt a sliver of hope that this nightmare might finally have an end. But with that hope came new fears. If she had done this before, how far could she go? Was she just running from the law, or was there something more dangerous beneath the surface? The agents advised me to prepare for the long haul. There would be court dates, interviews, maybe even a trial, and I'd likely have to testify. I wasn't sure I was ready to face her, or the truth. But deep down, I knew I had to, for my own sanity, for the people she'd hurt, and maybe, just maybe, for Alina herself. That night, I sat staring at my phone, the screen dark. I typed a message I never sent. "Why, Alina, why did you drag us into this?" No answer came. But this time, I was ready to find out. Weeks later, when the agents finally tracked Alina down, my world felt like it shifted beneath my feet again. They called me early one morning with the news. She had been located in a small motel just outside Las Vegas. The idea of facing her after everything, the lies, the betrayal, the damage, filled me with a mix of dread and a strange, desperate hope. I met the agents at a local federal office, and they told me the plan. I'd be there when she was brought in to help identify her and answer questions if needed. Part of me wanted to run away, but I knew I had to see it through. When Alina walked into the room, she looked smaller than I remembered. No longer the warm, thoughtful woman who used to leave me sticky notes. Her eyes darted nervously, avoiding mine. I struggled to hold my emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, all mixing into a heavy knot. "Why?" I asked her, voice shaking. She looked away. "I never wanted to hurt you." "Then why did you take out loans in my name? Why disappear?" She swallowed hard, tears in her eyes. "I was trapped. I didn't know how to get out. It started small. I never meant for it to go this far." Her words felt like a fragile thread. I wanted to believe them, but the evidence was overwhelming. "I'm paying for your mistakes," I said quietly. "My credit is ruined. My life is in chaos." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm sorry." The conversation was painful but honest. I saw a flicker of the woman I once loved, tangled up in fear and desperation. But I also knew this was only the beginning. There were legal battles ahead, questions to answer, and a long road to recovery for both of us. As the agents led her away, I realized something had shifted inside me. The pain was still raw, but so was a fragile sense of closure. Maybe one day I could forgive. But for now, I had to reclaim my life. After Alina was taken into custody, the whirlwind didn't stop. It shifted gears. Court dates, meetings with lawyers, countless phone calls from banks and credit agencies. Every day felt like a battle, and I was determined to fight it. The hardest part was reclaiming my own identity. I had to prove over and over that the debts weren't mine, that I was a victim of fraud. Slowly, painfully, some accounts were cleared, my credit score began to climb, and the nightmare started to fade. But the emotional scars ran deeper than any financial damage. I spent nights replaying everything: our laughter, the small moments, the trust I'd given so freely. I learned that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about understanding. Understanding that people can change, or maybe they just reveal who they really are when the pressure mounts. Friends and family rallied around me, reminding me I wasn't alone. Therapy helped me face the betrayal, the anger, and the fear of trusting again. One afternoon, as I walked through the park near our old apartment, I realized something important. This story, my story, wasn't just about loss, it was about resilience. About standing up when everything tries to break you. About finding strength in the darkest moments. Alina had taken a part of my life, but she hadn't taken me. I was still here, still fighting, still hopeful. And slowly, I began to rebuild. Piece by piece,